The message begins with a sense of urgent divine warning, as if the clock of heaven is ticking down to the final moments when choice and awareness can still shift the outcome of a human life. Only a few minutes remain to heed the call, and Archangel Michael's presence presses in like a sudden change in the atmosphere, weighty and unmistakable. He delivers a warning about false accusations that can come not from distant enemies but from those closest to the heart, the people one might least expect to betray. The accusation is not a vague rumor. It is personal, sharp, and carries the sting of love turned sour. Yet Michael insists that these charges, no matter how convincing they sound, cannot define the true essence of the soul they target. He speaks of the nature of the accusation as an arrow forged in deception, a tool of betrayal designed to break confidence and provoke fear. These false charges are loud but empty, lacking the substance to condemn a spirit held in divine truth. As this spiritual court convenes, Michael draws a clear line between earthly and heavenly judgments. He explains that while earthly courts may falter, misread evidence, and be swayed by human bias, the heavenly court discerns the heart with perfect clarity. In that realm, innocence stands untouched by rumor or malice, and Archangel Michael's fiery sword represents the ultimate truth that slices through every shadow of doubt before the final judgment is rendered. Michael then reveals his own role in this cosmic drama. He is not a distant observer but a warrior appointed to guard and to fight. Clad in armor of radiant light and wielding a sword of flame, he shields those who call upon him. His strength is not only a metaphor, it becomes an active force, intervening in the invisible realm, striking at darkness, and standing between the vulnerable soul and the assaults of spiritual enemies. He speaks of the battle he wages, sometimes manifesting as physical protection but more often taking place in the quiet depths of the unseen world where spirits clash and destinies are defended. The listener is invited to stand firm, to focus heart and mind with unwavering faith, for in the power of focus and faith lies the capacity to rewrite destiny. Just 20 seconds of undivided attention, Michael insists, can break chains of despair and open gates of divine intervention. Faith and focused thought act like a spiritual key, unlocking doors that no earthly force can keep closed. The Archangel draws a vital distinction between spiritual chains and earthly punishment. A person may be bound by fear, guilt, or the lies of others, yet in the spiritual reality of God's presence there is total freedom. True justice is not a matter of outward circumstances but of inward liberation, where the soul is untouchable and secure. Michael assures that God's protection hovers like a shield, rendering earthly outcomes powerless to harm the eternal self. Even betrayal from loved ones, as painful as it may be, becomes an instrument through which God works renewal. Betrayal cuts deeply, but it is often the very wound through which divine light pours, cleansing motives and revealing hidden strength. Fear and envy may fuel false accusations, but God's wisdom unearths the deeper truth behind every human action. Michael continues by proclaiming the certainty of divine justice and reversal. The very trap laid for the innocent will ensnare the accuser instead. Lies may burn brightly for a season, but truth endures and ultimately shines with undeniable force. Alongside Michael stand the angels and heavenly witnesses, unseen but attentive, holding scrolls of accusation and testimony. These angels are not silent. Their voices rise in songs of triumph, surrounding the faithful with assurance that innocence will be declared. Their presence transforms isolation into a choir of support, a reminder that no soul stands alone when aligned with heaven's purpose. A gentle but stirring call to spiritual awakening follows. The pressure, the trial, the unexpected turbulence, these are signs not of abandonment but of an approaching breakthrough. God's seal upon a life cannot be broken, and when the heart trembles under the weight of struggle, it often signals that deliverance is near. Michael urges the listener to remain steadfast, not to skip or flee the moment of testing. Every second of faithful attention builds an invisible fortress of light. Leaving early would squander the blessing hidden within perseverance, for staying through the storm strengthens the very structure of the Spirit. He promises victory and a crown for those who endure. What was intended to bring downfall will, in God's timing, become the very stepping stone to exaltation. The person who remains faithful will be elevated, vindicated, and crowned by divine justice. Heaven's clock continues to tick, underscoring the urgency of divine timing. None of these events are accidents. Each moment is woven into a grand design, a pivotal crossroads in the journey of destiny. God, Michael declares, holds sovereignty over every battle. No earthly power can override the verdict of the Almighty. When God speaks, all other voices fall silent, and His command becomes the final word over the storm. From this place of urgent heavenly sovereignty, Archangel Michael invites the listener to see trial not as a curse but as a refining fire through which transformation unfolds. Betrayal and false accusation become, in the alchemy of God's purpose, instruments that purify the heart and reveal its deepest resilience. Every sharp word, every misunderstanding, and every unjust judgment becomes fuel for a hidden blessing. Pain, though real, is never wasted. It is shaped by divine hands into wisdom, courage, and unshakable faith. Michael speaks of this process as a sacred forge in which the soul is tempered like steel, each blow from the hammer of adversity adding strength and brilliance to the spirit's edge. He reveals that the struggle is not merely psychological or emotional but profoundly spiritual. The battle is waged in realms unseen, where angels and adversaries contest over every human decision and desire. Though invisible to human eyes, this spiritual warfare is no less real than the ground beneath our feet. Michael warns that without spiritual awareness, people can be swept into despair, believing their fight is against flesh and blood, when in truth it is against forces far greater and more subtle. Yet he reassures that God has already provided a protective shield, and Michael himself stands as a sentinel in this hidden war, his sword a barrier against the encroaching darkness. The listener is called to recognize the signs of this warfare not with fear but with faith, understanding that unseen struggles are met with unseen reinforcements. In the thick of these battles, the assurance of God's presence and support becomes the lifeline. Michael speaks with a tone both commanding and tender, affirming that no one who calls upon the name of the Almighty stands alone. God's angels are actively surrounding the faithful, writing their names in books of remembrance and choosing them for victories that cannot be stolen. Each whispered prayer, each breath of trust, draws heaven closer until the soul is enveloped in a radiant company of divine allies. This presence does not merely comfort, it empowers, reminding the listener that God's promises are irrevocable and His watchful care unceasing. In the darkest night, when accusations echo and doubts multiply, the assurance of this companionship turns fear into courage and isolation into communion. Michael then focuses on the power of truth over lies, a theme that cuts through the entire message like a brilliant thread of light. He describes truth as an ocean so vast and deep that every wave of deception eventually drowns within it. Lies may appear to surge like a rising tide, but they are only foam upon the surface. Beneath, the current of eternal truth moves unstoppable and sure. Every second that the mind fixes upon God's reality, every heartbeat spent in trust, becomes a weapon that shatters the enemy's schemes. Focus is not merely mental discipline, it is spiritual warfare, a deliberate alignment with the frequency of heaven that causes falsehoods to collapse under their own weight. Michael urges the listener to let truth saturate every thought and word, to hold fast when rumors swirl, and to speak only what reflects the eternal character of God. In doing so, the soul becomes a beacon that no darkness can extinguish. As the message nears its crescendo, the Archangel issues a final call to action. This is not the time to hesitate, ignore, or delay. Every remaining moment is charged with eternal significance. Michael's words carry the urgency of a trumpet blast across a battlefield, summoning warriors to stand firm. He warns that distraction is the enemy's most subtle weapon, for a wandering mind leaves openings for fear and confusion. Instead, the listener is urged to remain attentive, to hold every thought captive to the truth of God's sovereignty. In this steadfast attention lies the key to ultimate victory, a victory not only over external opposition but over the internal doubts and fears that threaten to erode faith. The Archangel's message is both a shield and a roadmap. He assures that as the listener chooses faith over fear, the heavens themselves respond. Angels draw near with songs of triumph, their voices blending into a symphony that declares innocence and celebrates perseverance. The unseen chains of accusation, once heavy and intimidating, fall away like brittle twigs in a fire. Divine justice moves swiftly and precisely, turning every plot of darkness into an unexpected stage for God's glory. Michael promises that the crown of victory is not a distant dream but a present reality being woven in secret, soon to be revealed before both earthly and heavenly witnesses. He closes this segment of the revelation with a reminder that God's timing is perfect. Though the path may seem delayed or the night long, heaven's clock keeps flawless rhythm. Each test, each tear, and each quiet prayer has been counted and preserved. Nothing escapes the eye of the Almighty, and nothing can halt the fulfillment of His word. What began as an urgent warning unfolds now as a tapestry of hope and courage. The enemy's schemes are exposed, the accuser's voice is silenced, and the faithful soul stands ready to step into a destiny secured by divine love. With the foundations of divine assurance firmly established, Archangel Michael deepens the invitation to live daily in conscious partnership with heaven, for the struggle he describes is not an isolated event but an ongoing reality where spiritual vigilance becomes a way of life. He calls the listener to wake each morning with an awareness that every ordinary decision carries eternal resonance, that every quiet act of faith plants seeds of light in a field often veiled by shadows. Michael explains that spiritual warfare rarely announces itself with dramatic signs. More often it hides in subtle temptations to despair, in whispers of inadequacy, in the soft erosion of hope through endless distractions. To counter this, he urges a discipline of the heart that begins in silence before God, a deliberate setting of one's mind on truth and gratitude before the day unfolds. Such a practice, he says, is like polishing armor each dawn, ensuring that no unseen dart of deception can pierce the soul's defenses. He reminds that prayer is not merely words but alignment, a tuning of the heart to the frequency of heaven where angels move and God's power flows freely. In this quiet alignment, the believer gains clarity to discern lies before they take root and courage to stand firm when external pressures mount. Michael then turns to the theme of community, declaring that though the battle is personal, it is never solitary. He paints a vivid picture of believers standing shoulder to shoulder as living fortresses of light, their shared faith forming an unbroken wall against darkness. He encourages the listener to seek fellowship with those who nurture truth, to share burdens and victories alike, for isolation is the soil where fear germinates most quickly. In moments when betrayal or misunderstanding cuts deeply, he reminds that God often provides unexpected allies, people who, though perhaps unnoticed at first, become instruments of comfort and confirmation. These relationships, he says, are not accidental but divinely orchestrated, each encounter a thread in the larger tapestry of deliverance. Expanding on the mystery of divine timing, Michael explains that delays are rarely denials. What seems like waiting is often the careful weaving of circumstances beyond human sight, aligning hearts, events, and even adversaries so that the ultimate outcome carries the full weight of God's glory. He likens it to the precise choreography of the stars, each orbit measured, each movement purposeful, so that when the appointed moment arrives it cannot be mistaken for coincidence. He urges patience that is not passive but expectant, a patience that watches the horizon for signs of dawn and keeps the lamp of faith burning through the night. Every test of endurance, he says, expands the capacity of the soul to receive the blessings that are on their way, blessings that would be diminished if delivered too soon. Michael speaks next of the transformation that occurs as the heart chooses forgiveness over resentment. Betrayal, he acknowledges, leaves wounds that ache long after the initial shock has passed. Yet he reveals that forgiveness is not merely a moral obligation but a powerful act of spiritual warfare. To forgive is to sever the enemy's last hold, to refuse the chains of bitterness that can bind tighter than any external accusation. He assures that God's justice is never compromised by mercy. Indeed, it is through mercy that the deepest justice is fulfilled, for forgiveness frees both the offended and the offender to stand before divine light without shadow. This release allows the soul to rise above the reach of human judgment and to walk in a liberty that no earthly verdict can grant. The Archangel's voice grows steadier as he emphasizes the necessity of continual focus. He compares the mind to a watchtower overlooking a vast plain, its vigilance essential to spotting intruders before they breach the walls. Every thought entertained is a gate opened or closed. Every moment of deliberate truth-centered attention is a stone placed in the fortress of faith. Lies may attempt to disguise themselves as reason or practicality, but Michael insists that truth always carries a resonance recognizable to the spirit attuned to God. He encourages the listener to cultivate this inner resonance through scripture, worship, and acts of compassion, for these practices sharpen spiritual hearing and strengthen the ability to reject deception quickly. Finally, Michael paints a vision of the triumph awaiting those who persevere. He describes crowns not of fragile metal but of imperishable glory, rewards that are less objects than states of radiant being. In this victory, the faithful will find every tear accounted for and every hidden act of courage celebrated. What once seemed like senseless suffering will be revealed as essential preparation, each hardship a chisel stroke shaping the soul into a masterpiece of divine artistry. He assures that angels rejoice over each step of progress, their songs echoing through dimensions unseen, testifying that the battle is already won even as it is being fought. This is not merely the promise of a distant future, it is a reality breaking into the present, a kingdom advancing even now through every act of trust and every heartbeat of steadfast love. Thus the Archangel concludes this segment of the message with a renewed call to steadfastness. Remain watchful, nurture faith, walk in forgiveness, and know that heaven's power surrounds every breath. The victory is not merely possible, it is certain, for the author of all time has decreed it, and his word cannot fail. As the vision reaches its completion, Archangel Michael invites the listener to stand in quiet awe of the larger story now revealed, a story in which every moment of trial has become a brushstroke in a masterpiece of redemption. He declares that the journey is not about escaping conflict but about being transformed within it, until the soul reflects the very light it has pursued. The false accusations that once threatened to define identity are shown for what they truly were, empty echoes of an enemy already defeated. Michael reminds that victory is not merely the absence of struggle but the presence of unshakable peace in the midst of it, a peace that rests on the certainty of God's sovereignty. He speaks of the crown awaiting the faithful, not as a distant prize but as a present reality, a spiritual authority already placed upon those who choose steadfast love over fear. In this authority the believer walks with quiet confidence, no longer swayed by rumors or intimidated by shadows, for the heart now beats in rhythm with the eternal. Michael urges a life lived in continual gratitude, for gratitude itself is a weapon that disarms despair and magnifies the evidence of divine goodness in every detail of daily existence. He paints a picture of each dawn as a fresh summons to courage, each nightfall as an invitation to rest in the unchanging promises of God. The seasons of waiting, the storms of accusation, the moments of hidden struggle, all have converged to reveal a deeper truth, that nothing can separate the beloved from the love of the Creator. He then calls the listener to become a messenger of this same hope. The deliverance received is not meant to be hoarded but shared, for every life touched by divine protection becomes a beacon to others still wandering in darkness. Michael encourages the faithful to speak words of life in workplaces, families, and communities, to embody the calm strength that comes from knowing heaven stands guard. He explains that each act of kindness is an arrow of light, each word of encouragement a spark that can ignite faith in hearts grown cold. In this way the victory expands, not by force but by the gentle contagion of love and truth. He speaks of a ripple effect where one courageous stand inspires another, until entire networks of people become living testaments to the reality of God's care. Michael's tone carries both the majesty of a herald and the warmth of a companion as he reminds that the smallest gesture, an offered prayer, a quiet listening ear, a steadfast refusal to repeat a rumor, can shift the atmosphere in ways unseen but profound. The Archangel lingers on the theme of ongoing partnership with the divine. Deliverance is not a single event to be remembered but a continual relationship to be nurtured. Prayer, he insists, is the lifeblood of this partnership, not as a formula but as a conversation in which the heart listens as much as it speaks. Through such communion, the believer becomes increasingly sensitive to the gentle promptings of the Spirit, able to recognize opportunities for grace in the most unexpected places. Michael encourages the listener to cultivate a rhythm of daily worship, a practice that anchors the soul and keeps the mind attuned to the higher reality even amid ordinary tasks. He promises that as gratitude and trust become habitual, the presence of God will be experienced not only in dramatic moments of deliverance but in the quiet pulse of everyday life, in the laughter of friends, the beauty of creation, the stillness before dawn. Finally, Michael offers a benediction of courage. He assures that no force of darkness, no whispered accusation, no lingering doubt can withstand the light of God's truth. The believer who stands firm in faith is already more than a conqueror, carrying within them a victory that cannot be undone. He calls for a life marked by hope that refuses despair, by love that overcomes fear, by faith that sees beyond the visible horizon. This is the life of one who has heard the urgent warning, received the protection of heaven, and now walks in the freedom of deliverance. The message that began with a trumpet of alarm concludes with a song of triumph, a melody that invites every listener to join the chorus of those who know that the battle is won. Michael's final words are both gentle and commanding. Remain awake, remain faithful, and let the light you carry become a guide for others still seeking the way home. And as you take these words into your own life, let them continue to resonate beyond this moment. If this message of courage and divine protection speaks to your heart, consider joining a community where such inspiration is nurtured and shared. You can find ongoing reflections, teachings, and encouragement that echo Michael's call by subscribing to Archangel Inspire on YouTube, a place created to keep this conversation alive and to help you walk each day with the same steadfast hope described here. It is not merely a channel but a gathering of kindred spirits who seek to live with clarity, strength, and a deep awareness of heaven's nearness. Let your next step of faith be simple. Stay connected, stay encouraged, and let the journey continue together.